So it may not be as excited as the other talks because I don't talk about database, but I talk about security in ClickHouse Cloud. Because I think it's very important as you run a database in the cloud, right? And if you as a consumer and want to use our database, you want to make sure that your data is secure. So this is me. I'm an application product security dude. I spent 10 plus years doing pen testing, and then do about 5 or 6 years doing product security, cloud security engineering stuff. This is actually what I look like from a developer perspective. I'm that over paranoid guy, right? I'm trying to stop people from doing stuff. No, not really. I try to enable them in a way that's secure. So let's talk about ClickHouse Cloud security features journey. Here we have a timeline. In December 2022, that's when we had the GA launch. We had very basic stuff, IP filtering, because if you run a database in the cloud and people are going to access it over TLS, it doesn't matter. You don't want it to be exposed on the internet. You want IP filtering right from the get-go. You want, obviously, it comes with username and password by default, like any database does. And workload isolation was actually most of the work that we do at the beginning. So trying to make sure that security boundaries are set, security control are in place, making sure that our Kubernetes clusters are tightly secure. And then in March 2023, we added MFA because multi-factor is important. People get into trouble if you don't have MFA on. And private link. Private link is important because, again, IP filtering is great, but sometimes compliance come and say, hey, you can't just have a database on the internet. And you go, well, guess what? You can actually do private link to connect to your database, and it's no longer going over the internet anymore, as long as it's in the same regions as your AWS environment. SQL console using certificate authentication. This is a big piece. Because again, remember, we were using username and password, and it's not great because you can get credential stuffing, you can get brute force, and I'm going to talk more a bit on the certificate authentication later. Then in June 2023, mid-year, we already have CMEC, Customer Managed Encryption Key. I think some of you might be interested in this because this basically means that you can provide your own AWS KMS key. We encrypt the data using a data key that then get encrypted by your AWS KMS key, essentially envelope encryptions. And if you decide to go away, don't want to use us anymore, remove the AWS KMS key, we can no longer access the data anymore. REST API security. Again, lots of customers wanted to use REST API to be able to speed up, scale down their database. They want to be able to deploy via Terraform. So we need a REST API, and of course, security comes with that as well. Secure S3 access. Again, lots of customers was using access key and secret key to pull data. And of course, security team come knocking on the door, say, hey, you can't just be distributing this access key and secret key to people. And so we have secure S3 access using assume role. I'll talk a bit about that later. And in December 2023, which is just recently, basically this is like between June and December, we work on quick data ingestions, pipeline, and how we secure that. We have self-serve security, secure S3 and private link, because earlier it was required to go through support to be able to set this up. We have Auth0 migrations from our previous IDP to prepare for bring your own SAML identity provider next years. So lots is coming. Let's get to the details. Workload isolation. So this was, remember, first thing we did was focusing on workload isolations. So I actually borrowed these pictures from the Building ClickHouse Cloud from scratch in 1 year blog post. It's really good blog post about building ClickHouse Cloud by our data plane team. But what they didn't really show is that all of these components are actually isolated from each other. So like control plane, this is all in its own AWS accounts. This data plane is in its own data plane account, and we actually have multiple data plane accounts. So not only AWS accounts are being separated, we also deem that the load balancers itself are dangerous workloads. So we also have a completely separate community clusters for it. So again, many of you probably trust community clusters, security control, namespaces, or node group. But in some instances, you may not trust it at all. And what if there's an ODA in your community clusters? Someone got onto your load balancers because there's vulnerabilities. In which case, we want to completely separate that from our customers' workloads, which is where ClickHouse server running. On top of that, the object storage is also completely separate because it's in their own S3 buckets. So again, separate from the CPU compute instance. So that's the workload isolation. I'm going through this really fast because we don't have much time. We're going to talk a little bit about console certificate authentication. When we launched the GA, this is how people using ClickHouse Cloud. Basically, oh, that's not me, that's outside. They were using the Play UI inbuilt, and they also was using basically the ClickHouse native protocol to talk to ClickHouse using username and password. And then straight away at GA, so this is beta launch, and then at GA launch, we got the AppTag team came in, we acquired AppTag, and they built this beautiful UI, but unfortunately we will still have to use username and password then. And even though, as a security team, I laid out all the requirements, I make sure that we don't cache the credential, we don't lock it anywhere, we don't store it. At the back of our mind, we still worry about how, all of these credentials, and it's a honeypot. So within maybe a month or two, working with the teams, we decided that, we're not going to pass client credentials. And then we read about others teams like HashiCorp Boundaries and many others. The way they do things is for Zero Trust is they actually store the credential in, say, HashiCorp Vault, and then they pull it out. And when you authenticate using a JWT, you then access the database, inject the credential, username and password into your connection stream. And it's still database. It's still username and password being stored somewhere. It's not great. So then we look at, I check it out, and we actually support SSL user certificate for authentications for a long time. And this worked at the time only with HTTP, but now it supports with native as well, and you can use this in your own environments, and I highly recommend. And the cool thing about certificate authentication works is that when you authenticate, it actually checks for validity of the client certificate against the whatever CA that you have in your environment, right? So you set that up in your server, and it will trust that CA, and then as user certificate come in, it has to come from that CA or intermediate CA. And then it also, each cert have a short time span. So for ClickHouse Cloud, we use like an hour. So basically, even if our control plane get hacked, there's maybe a couple of 1 hour certificate lying around. But again, there's more security control on top of that, is that you can't actually use this certificate from outside of ClickHouse environments to hack us. Even if you have a SQL injection into our control plane, pull this certificate out, you can't possibly use it from outside of our environment, because the requirement for certificate authentication is that you have to terminate the TOS at the ClickHouse server, and that can only happen within our environments. From outside, you can actually terminate TOS at the proxy layer. So this sort of like very high level, I just draft this up from the other diagram. But basically, again, security boundary is important. So we have our own security account that managing all the certs and doing all the handling of the cert. We leverage the big players, AWS, and we just use IAM authentications here to basically acquire the user certificate, and obviously server get the certificate from our security account as well. So again, even if you hack control plane, hack our plane, you can't hack security account. That's tightly being managed and reviewed all the time and monitors. Cool. So this is a great segue into how we secure ClickHouse, which is used by many other teams at the moment. This is ClickPipe. We have many sources of data coming into ClickPipe and then going into ClickHouse. And the way ClickHouse authenticate with ClickHouse is via certificate authentications. So again, only a short-lived certification and with the users is limited on access to the ClickHouse database. So even if this ClickPipe instance get compromised, it's not going to have authentications, long-lived certificate or something like that. And we definitely don't want to be on the news like Microsoft did. Basically, they got popped Azure Synapses pipeline because of the, if I remember correctly, it was the Redshift vulnerabilities on the client side, but it's a RCE. So imagine if someone ingests something silly and then pop a shell onto this pipe. Again, it'd be hard because the Docker container will be stripped out. But anyway, let's just say that didn't happen. Well, guess what? ClickHouse overload isolations. So yes, it is in its own little islands like Tasmania, because we don't want to trust that, and we want to protect our rest of ClickHouse. So yeah, that's where ClickHouse lives, in its own little islands, in its own little community clusters, in its own AWS account. And hopefully, even when it does get popped, we're not gonna, we have time to react. A lot of the time, the mindset going into ClickHouse Cloud security is about assume breach. We just assume that we get breached at any point. Any components can get breached, and then we work backwards from there. How we can slow down the attackers, how we can monitor it for abnormality, and how we can identify threats, right? And of course, being a ClickPipe, you have all these credentials coming in from customers who want to, say, ingest data from various sources. So we need to handle this credential with care. And so the first thing I say to the team is, I don't care what you do, but you encrypt that stuff right away, the moment it landed on the control plane. And then you just take that block. And in fact, control plane doesn't even have the ability to actually decrypt the data, because there's no way. It goes into security account and encrypt the data. And then after that, the encrypted block being handled and shared and passed around to data plane team or data plane or other places. And the only time that it will get decrypted is when it's actually being used to ingest. So that the only time you should see it is in the memory of the process that is ingesting the data. I mean, at some point it's going to have to be decrypted and being used. So I can live with that. So I'm going to go quickly over CMEC, Customer Managed Encryption Key. We use envelope encryption techniques. So again, you provide us with a KMS key in here. And we will encrypt the data key that encrypt your data, right? And then basically you can rotate your KMS key in the future. Well, I think we don't make it easily to rotate right now. We can do it for you if you raise a support request. Let's say your environment gets compromised, you want to rotate the KMS key, we can do it for you. But basically, that data key can will then be decrypted so that it can be used to decrypt your data using your KMS key. But when you take your KMS key away or you block our access, we can no longer start the instance or decrypt your data anymore. Secure S3 access. If you used ClickHouse before, you know that most of the time you have to use access key and secret key to access your database. You can also use, I guess, the role attached to your pods or your EC2 instance to access the database. But in ClickHouse, we use role. So basically, the AWS the pods, your ClickHouse pod will assume into a role inside your environment and then access your buckets. This way, you don't actually have to mess around with different bucket policy and then adding permissions. And then after that, if you say you move away and you don't want to use us anymore, you live with a bunch of buckets and a bunch of policies. It's not really cool. So we want it to be easy for you guys to unplug yourself from us as well. So you can just remove the roles and be done with it. But it's also give you this nice single place to manage all the access for the service. And once you set that up, you can do something like that. This is only available in the cloud version, so you can put in the extra credential, the role that you want us to assume in, and then you can even have this is an Easter egg, but there's a role session name that you can basically set to anything you want, and then that can add additional extra security on top. Basically, it has to match with whatever shared secrets role session name that you have on your trust policy for your IAM role as well. So, if you have any questions, in fact, you can probably just go to trust.clickhouse.com, which have all the information you need. We like to work in the open, so you can download our pen test report. We have a bug bounty program, so if you want to be a hacker, go ahead and hack us and raise the vulnerabilities in BugCrowd. We will pay you. And of course, please join the ClickHouse communities. It's a very vibrant communities, lots of people, lots of folks. You can bounce ideas off. We'll be on the Slack channel all the time answering your questions if you want to ask any questions. And yeah, it's only $300 to join today, and you get free 30-day trial. Nice. And that's it.
Round of applause.
Thank you.